Have you ever given up your voice? Have you ever held back and not said something that you really wanted to say or spoke up for yourself, but held back out of fear, shame, or not wanting to overstep your bounds or your limits? That's what we're talking about today. I am bringing on a special guest who is going to share her experience of how she diminished her voice, which led her to be trafficked, not by a stranger, but by her boyfriend and soon to be husband. You're going to learn the power of rewriting your own story, pulling back the curtains, and finding courage to speak up for yourself and learning that your voice is a gift and we need to stop discounting ourselves. I'm Clara Capano, and this is Women Winning Their Way. Welcome back, everyone. We have an amazing episode of Women Winning Their Way today, and I am bringing up Janelle Anderson. And Janelle does an amazing job. If you are out there as a coach, a speaker, and you're looking to do virtual events, she is the virtual event visionary, and she really helps people bring together and hold profitable events. We're going to put all that information in the show notes because what we're really talking about today is how Janelle learned to stand tall and to create success all on her terms. So Janelle, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Clara. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. We met through a mutual friend, and I knew I had to get you on the show to share a lot of your wisdom and your journey with us. I want to just start off by saying, the title of the show, Women Winning Their Way. When you hear that, what does that spark inside for you? What do you take away when you hear women winning their way?
Well, what really comes up for me right away with that phrase is that, women tend to be people pleasers. I was definitely one of the biggest people pleasers in the world, I think. And so many women do struggle with that, which we want to take care of everyone around us and make sure everybody's good. And we end up putting our way on the shelf, right? And not really standing up for ourselves or even asking for what we really want because, well, then that might infringe on somebody else and we want to make sure they're happy, all of that. And that was a big part of most of my life. So when I hear women winning their way, to me, that means women who know what they want are valuing themselves enough that they embrace the fact that, hey, it's okay for me to have things my way. It's okay for me to speak up and ask for what I want or what I need. It's okay for me to voice my opinions and, have a say in things, right? And do what I really want to do and what I'm passionate about. It doesn't take away from other people. When I do things my way, the things that fulfill me, the things that I was designed to do and that I was created to do, just reminds me of a story. I'm not throwing my husband under the bus because we're good now, but when we first married, he had this concept in his mind that a wife was, the helpmate or helpmeet or whatever, and that he was called into youth ministry as a minister, and we were starting this youth ministry, this nonprofit teen center. And so because I was his wife, well, then naturally it was my job to do all the secretarial work and all that stuff. Right. But I was teaching full time and it overwhelmed me. And it wasn't my passion. I was happy to support him. I was happy to be there with him, but my calling is something different. And it took me a while to find my voice because I had just come out of a bad spell of years where I didn't have a voice. And so it took me a while to kind of begin to vocalize, hey, wait a minute. I feel called to this and it's okay. And it's okay if we have different callings and different passions and we can support each other. But I want to do this. I'm not another version of you. I am me.
Exactly.
That's what I think about. Yeah.
And I think, you hit on something really strong. It's the idea of knowing who we are, valuing ourselves, but this idea of taking our voice back and using our voice. And you alluded to the fact that for many years, you gave up your voice or didn't use your voice. Can you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit more about that part of your journey and how that impacted you?
Oh yeah, it impacted me in a much deeper way than I realized for a long time. But when I was when I started college, is when it first really started. There were some things that happened before that, but the two big events were I was a sophomore in college, went out one night with my roommate. We were flirting with some guys. The next thing I remember is waking up in my bed in the middle of the night and this guy's on top of me and I can't move.
Mm,
And I don't know how I got there and I'm very confused. And then I blacked out. And when I woke up in the morning, he was gone, but I realized what had happened and I was a virgin.
mm,
And so I looked at the sheets and there's blood on the sheets and I realized, oh my gosh, I just lost my virginity
mm,
to some guy I don't even know. And then my next thought was, I must not be worth anything. I must be just a piece of trash. I didn't even realize I'd been drugged or raped. To me, it was something I did. I somehow put myself in that position. I somehow made myself, whether I drank too much or whatever, I couldn't even remember what had happened. And it totally shifted me. I was already pretty much an introvert and kind of shy. I grew up in a big family.
mhm,
It was hard to be heard in a big family. I already kind of was that way. And I was already on the whole track of pleasing people and not having confidence and wanting to be wanted, wanting to be loved, and wanting to know that I was attractive. And so it all came down to the story of something's wrong with me for a guy to do that. And it really got embedded a couple days later when I saw him on campus and he just looked right through me like I didn't exist, walked right by me like I didn't exist. And I was like, I must be really just ugly, fat, nothing. So that story, carried through. We ended up moving to Colorado with my family and I ended up changing schools. But for the next 4 years, just one thing after another, one guy after another. And
mm,
then after I'd graduated from college, I met another guy who convinced me, let's go out to California. And I didn't have a job. So I'm like, okay, we'll drive to California. And on the way, he's like, let's stop in Las Vegas. Next thing I know, about a month later, I'm sitting on a bar stool in a casino, all dressed up, not wanting to do what I'm about to do, feeling nauseous, wanting to run, but I can't because he's standing at the door watching me. I feel like I don't have a choice here. And I a man comes and sits next to me. He asks me if I'm a working girl, which is the term for prostitute or hooker. I say yes. And that began 3 years of being trafficked by my boyfriend. But again, not realizing I was being trafficked.
mhm,
Again, the story was I'm bad.
mm,
I'm worthless. I'm agreeing to do this. I'm a prostitute. I'm selling my body. What kind of person am I? And that story became so embedded in my soul. It did a number on my soul, like just the fact that I was doing that, but also for the next 3 years,
mm,
hundreds and hundreds of men
mhm,
buying my body, right? And what that does to a woman and her self esteem and her feeling worthy of love, all of that was completely destroyed. And so my voice was silenced. I didn't feel like I had a voice. I didn't feel like I had any right to ask for anything. I
mhm,
felt trapped. This
right.
was my life. I had said yes to this. It wasn't until many years later when I finally began to face my past because I buried it for a long time, didn't tell anybody about it, was too ashamed. When I finally began to unpack it, I found out that actually the definition of trafficking is that part of it is that you are coerced or manipulated into it
Mhm,
by someone that you think you're in a relationship with. Because all those years I didn't think I'd been trafficked. I wasn't kidnapped. I wasn't drugged. I
right.
wasn't locked away. Right. And so when I read that, I was like, oh, oh, it wasn't that I was worthless. I was actually primed by
Right.
somebody who knew what he was doing and took advantage of my vulnerability and my state of emotions and mind and everything and purposely put me out there, right? And constantly worked on my mind throughout those 3 years in many different ways of manipulating to keep me there. And so that really helped me, that realization and unpacking that truth about myself helped me. That was the turning point of getting my confidence back, finding my voice again, realizing that I did have worth and value as a human being and as a woman, and able to embrace my younger self
Mhm.
with compassion instead of turning her away with shame. uh, just it was a period of time where all this happened, but that's when I was able to start speaking up,
Mhm.
sharing my story, getting boldness, finding my way, like going after things that I really wanted, and women winning my way, like it's my thing now, and understanding that I had every right to do all whatever I wanted to do. And so that's where I lost my voice, but I'm here
Yeah.
today to say I found it. I got
Yeah,
it back.
exactly. And I appreciate you being so open and honest, because I know that that's not an easy story. And I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. You and I are part of a group together, the
Yep.
You Are My Light Foundation, where we are actually working to build healing centers for those survivors of trafficking.
Yeah. Mhm.
And, being able to finally be willing to buy into the truth again, not to live in the shame, that takes a lot of courage. And you are on such a different level of this, but I think that there's so many small ways where we give up our voice every day. It's the person that cuts in front of us in line and we don't say something. It's the
Mm.
person that says, "Oh no, I'll order for us," and we don't say, "Well, that's not what I really want." Or, not being included in decision making in the office. You had it on such a monumentally higher level than that. But, you mentioned that when you were able to finally look at the truth and be open to that, what even brought you to that? Because there had to be a process. What finally gave you the courage to stand up and say, enough,
Yeah.
and work on taking your voice back? Because I'm sure it
Mhm.
wasn't just an overnight occurrence.
No, no, not at all. It was many years actually of gradually, I think phases. I kind of went through phases. So one of the biggest turning points for me where I realized I really needed to deal with this uh was a couple of points. My church really helped a lot because they have a ministry in helping people with those deeper stories, helping them process through them and talk them out in a safe space where they're not going to be judged, which is unusual. I mean, a lot of churches, you do worry about being judged, and that was why I stayed silent. But
Mhm.
this church, they weren't like that. And so I remember sitting there listening to other women share their stories openly, and I thought, aren't they afraid to do that? It so surprised me, and that made me start to think, well, maybe I should, but I still didn't want to because I didn't want to talk about the past. Who wants to talk about that? You know, and who wants to hear that? And I didn't want to make people feel bad. I didn't want to bring out this heavy story that, because every time I tell it, a lot of times women will cry, people will cry. And who wants to make people
Mhm.
feel that way? And so that was another reason. But I remember one day, uh, really feeling like something, I was at that age, late 50s by now, where I realized I'm not happy in my job anymore. I wasn't teaching school anymore. I was working as an administrative assistant. I was getting older. This wasn't thrilling me. It wasn't like floating my boat. And I thought, well, I don't want to do this until I'm 65 and then just retire. Like, what else is there for me?
Mhm.
And every time I would come up with an idea, I would think, oh, I can't do that. Oh, no, I'm not good enough for that. And I would keep discounting myself and not even taking steps or not even like going after anything. And one day, I believe it was in church where I just realized like I feel like I'm hitting a wall somewhere where I'm like not connecting with people very deeply. I'm not connecting with God very deeply. Like something's in the way.
Mhm.
And as I was praying about that, I actually saw this picture in my mind of a garden, and it had a wall around it, and Jesus was outside the wall looking for a way in, and he found the door and he came in, and the garden was really cultivated and beautiful and fruitful on the outer part of it, and then if you go deeper it was covered with thorns and thistles and weeds and dark. And so he goes over to pick up some tools to start working deeper in the garden, and he looks at me kind of like, will you let me go there?
Mm,
And it struck me, it was like one of those like moments of like clarity,
mhm,
huge clarity, like, I know what you're saying. You're asking me to
mhm,
actually go back into my past and talk about it. And I don't want to do that.
mhm.
It
But it's time to
scared me.
clean out the garden and get the weeds out.
Yeah. And it scared me because what are people going to think?
Mhm.
And I don't want to feel those emotions again. I've worked so hard for 30 some years to ignore them. And I don't want to bring that up again, but it became over time, became really, because it kept coming back to me and coming back. Like until you deal with this, you're not going to be able to get through that wall of lack of confidence, and you're not going to be able to really pursue what I have for you.
Mhm.
And that desire to really fulfill my own calling and get to the end of my life and be happy with what I did with what God gave me, like that was greater than holding on to the past and hiding the past.
Yeah.
So that became greater, like that desire to, I don't want to get to the end of my life and look back and say I should have done this, I could have done that, I didn't.
So I got a question for you because I've seen this with so many other people, and I know I've done it in my life too, where you're absolutely right. You don't want to go back. You don't want to feel that way again. In some ways, even as a coach and stuff, it's like, no, let's go forward. Let's get the strategy and go forward. But
Yeah.
you're right. Until you sort of clean up the past, you just keep carrying that baggage, whether it's pushed
Yeah.
down a million times or not. It's still baggage that you are carrying. And I'm thinking of a couple people right now that I know that are doing this, and they're not healing. They think they're fine, they're not healing. So if you were with someone, you can't do it for them, but what could
Yeah.
a friend do? What could a family member do to encourage someone to feel safe enough to say, you gotta go face this?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I had such resistance to it. So I was so resistant that, and I think there were people in my life, my husband, for one, my current husband, um, because I ended up marrying my trafficker, which was my first husband.
Ah.
Yeah, that's another story. But when he and I married, I was only 3 years out of that relationship with my trafficker, who became my first husband. And so I was extremely, you know, vulnerable and very traumatized still, not knowing it. But anyway, he saw it and he would say to me over the years, like, you really need to get some help. You really need to go talk to somebody. And I'd be like, no, are you crazy?
Mm,
So it's hard when there's that much resistance. So I think what really helped me was just being surrounded by people who just, they weren't, they just loved people without the judgment. It was the biggest thing for me, was like realizing these women feel safe enough to share the most personal things here in this group, not before the whole church, but this was like a small group. And then I could watch like how others were ministering to them and talking them through it and helping them heal. And I thought, wow, that is really like a new thing.
mhm.
And even then, for a while it was like, I'm not going to share. But over time, I felt more and more safe. So I think it's like creating that space for people, especially if they have a lot of resistance.
Mhm.
Instead of, you don't want to come in and say, you need help, you need to go do this and go do that. Like that's going to be like more resistance. But it's like being there and listening without judgment and holding the space for them. And, over time, then, where they feel safe, then, and even when I finally did, it was like in a very small group of two people, two people and me, and sometimes just one other person, where it was totally safe and totally, I knew everything was held in confidence. I had to have those, boundaries, and I had to know that whatever I shared in that room was going to stay in that room, and that it was okay to say whatever I needed to say. And they weren't going to judge me. They were just going to let me talk it out. And they
So
weren't going to tell me what to do either.
Mhm.
So
So important to make people and to build that trust and know that it takes time.
yeah.
I would love to ask, if you have any thoughts. Again, you were on such a monumental level compared to most people, but that doesn't mean that we don't have situations where people cut us off or try to diminish our voice. So what would be something for just maybe in the normal realm of life, if you find that someone is cutting your voice down, or maybe you're holding back your voice. What could be some easy things? Because I think we do get into our head of, I don't want to sound pushy. I don't want to sound annoying, or that I'm high maintenance. I hear that a lot. Or that
Yes.
I'm so particular and so rigid, and we
Mm.
tell ourselves those things and then we don't speak up.
Mhm.
That
Yeah,
hurts us. So, what are some maybe easy ways that we could learn to lean into our voice?
really great question. It made me think of this job I had once where I was the office manager, and I didn't feel like I belonged at the table
Mhm.
because all these women had PhDs and all these degrees, and I was just the office manager. And I remember feeling that way, and it was my first meeting with them, staff meeting. And afterwards, several of them, these women that I was intimidated by, came up and said, you were the perfect person. You came up to the top out of all the applicants. We're so glad you're here. You earned it. You deserve it." And so that made me feel like, comfortable enough to start speaking up. But I learned from that, when you feel that way, like, if I speak up, I'm going to be either interrupted, shut down, or they're going to tell me I'm too much, or they're going to tell me to be quiet, I don't know, whatever you're afraid of. That, stop and realize that that's a story you're telling yourself. That
Mhm.
was a story I was telling myself. It wasn't true at all, but
Yeah.
it was a story that I believed. And so, ask yourself, first of all, is this a story I'm just telling myself? Or is it really true that, that thing will happen? And even if it does happen, how do I it's really a place of believing in yourself so much and understanding the value and worth that you have. A
Mhm.
lot of times we look for other people to give us that value and worth, to validate us. And if other people aren't validating us, we don't feel worthy.
Right.
But when you can create that inside yourself, for yourself, nobody can take that away from you.
Yeah.
And
I
so it's
remember.
that place of like, I know I have an opinion and it is just as valuable as anybody around this table. Even if it's not the right idea or people don't act on it, it's still like what I'm thinking is just as valuable
Mhm.
as anybody else. And if you have that for yourself, then you can often just overcome those stories, that you're telling yourself, that fear of speaking up, and
Yeah.
kind of like sitting with that for a minute and say, wait a minute, am I not speaking because I'm believing the story? Am I not speaking up because I'm intimidated by other people in the room? I'm letting them tell me my worth, or is it just that maybe I don't want to speak up?
Right.
And if it's like I do have something to say, and I'm not speaking up because I'm feeling that, well, shifting yourself over to, but wait a minute, I have something of value to share too, and it could help somebody. If I don't speak up, I'm not contributing, and it could hurt, could take away from other people.
Yeah,
Um,
for
yeah.
sure. A few things are coming up when you're saying that. I remember hearing a long time ago, we teach others how to treat us,
Yes.
how we treat ourselves. And I think that goes pretty strong in alignment with what you're saying. I also, think this idea, I wrote it down, the idea of stop discounting yourself,
Yes.
really believe in it. And this last piece that you talked about, I bring this up a lot in my talks when I speak. It's the idea of knowing that you're coming from a place of value. And this is for yourself just as much as a product that you have, because again, we are our product. You have to speak up. You have an obligation to speak up. And when you speak up, when you're coming from a place to truly serve and help others,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you want to? Whether they choose to listen, to engage, or whatever, it's out of your control. But if you're coming from a place of saying, listen, I have to say this because I really think it's going to enlighten you, help you, whatever it is, we have to remember that that's not egotistical. That's coming from a place of love. That's coming from a place of value. And so that really came together with me. I would love to hear. I know that you've learned so many lessons and you've shared some of these. Again, asking yourself, is that a story I've created? What's the truth? Being able to do this because now you run your own business.
Hmm.
How have these lessons, as awful, terrible, horrific as they were to go through, what are some of the lessons of life that you can hold on to that these have brought you? What is some of the beauty that has maybe come out of this horrible event that happened?
Well, yes, a lot of good has come out of it. I think, and something that you just said too is, the knowing that you have something that can help other people, even if it's just one person in the room, it's worth sharing. That has been a huge tip, I guess, or just, I don't know, something I live by now, because for so long I felt like nobody really wants to hear what you have to say, Janelle. You're boring, and you're whatever, those stories. And when I first shared my story for the first time publicly, so many women in the room came up to me just in tears, thanking me for that I shared my story because of how it helped them. It was at a retreat. And for the rest of the weekend, the small groups in that retreat, the stories coming out of that were amazing, because these women now felt like they could open up because of what I had done. And that really, like,
Yeah.
that lesson right there that you just said, like, when you're not speaking up, how you're holding back, like you're discounting yourself, and you're also not impacting the lives that you could be impacting. And it does take bravery and courage, but then when you see the effect of it, so I always look at that and think, oh my gosh, look how far I've come from this scared young girl and young woman all through my life, of even when I started coach training, still scared to speak up, to now I'm a speaker and I'm a coach and I have my own programs. And uh, because I so believe, and I see now, like, what I have to share does have value, and it changes lives. And so it's my responsibility to share it,
Mhm.
so that
Yeah.
it may not change everybody's life, but there might be just one person out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that you came on and shared
Mhm.
it, because I know it's going to resonate with people out there, and, really help to impact lives and teach
Oh,
just women, and even, others out there that, we do matter and our voices matter too. I would love to
absolutely.
ask, I know your journey isn't even done, and have your own company, and I would love to hear, what are some of the things you're working on now? What's next for Janelle?
Yeah. I've got some events coming up. The virtual edge workshop here is coming up, comes up monthly, actually. And what I do now is I help coaches to get their voice out there and their message out there through their own, on really creating their own stage through their own events, and really putting on an event that is transformational and engaging, and brings them clients. But more than that, they get a chance to interact with people and really pour into them. And then, of course, some of those people become their clients. So uh, I love to teach that. I do a lot of workshops myself. So this workshop is about putting on your own workshop and the 7 steps to really stand out and make money online with online events. So that's coming up. It's a new workshop. It's just starting. And then I also have a 3-day event 3 times a year. So the next one's coming up pretty soon, a couple months. And it's all about virtual events and how they fit into your business model as a coach, and how it can really be a financial engine for your business. So it's
I
true, really
love that.
excited about that. Yeah.
It is. And again, just delivering, I love how you're taking this concept of you delivering impact, but then teaching others how they can deliver more impact, on a virtual stage. And I know I'm already signed up for your webinar, and I can't wait to
Yay.
be a part of it. I heard you speak last weekend, and you gave a lot of value in just a quick 25-minute talk. So I know that that's where your heart and your passion is. I really encourage everyone to, follow you, stay connected, and to know that you're creating a safe space for other people
Yeah.
to share and to step into their own light. So I have one last question to ask you, Janelle. Sitting where you sit today, going through everything that you've gone through, how do you define success for yourself now?
Success for me now. I've done so many things I never thought I could do. Speak, I've written books, I run a company, um, and make money on my own. I mean, that was something I never thought I could do. So, women winning it their way, like, that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. And to me, it's not just making money, although that has been one thing that I feel define success for me, just because I have this whole life of scarcity, and now it's like, abundance, and
Mhm.
I deserve to make good money too.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. It's the lives that I can have an impact on, like you were saying. And when I see my clients start to succeed and start to have that because a lot of times coaches are like, I don't know how to do a business. I don't know how to market. I don't know how to sell. I just want to coach. And it's hard for them to build a sustainable business without all the other stuff. And so many of them give up. But when I see them start to get it and start to have that confidence, and like I have a client right now who just built her own website. And we're so excited for her because when she first signed up with me, she had nothing at all and was so overwhelmed. And she's lighting up and her smile is there and she's feeling confident and ready for the next step. When I see that,
Mhm.
that is success.
I love that.
Anytime I see any of my clients starting to spread their wings and fly and see their own success, because that means they're going to make impact on all of their people and all of their clients, and their clients will make impact. Like it's a ripple effect. So
Mhm. Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, Janelle, thank you again so much for being here, for being so willing to share your story, and also to remind all of us we don't have to live in the stories that either we created or somebody else created for us. And to just know that even in the darkest of times, we all are courageous and we need to start living in that courage. And you
mm,
definitely are an example of that, and it's just an honor to be able to learn from you, to work alongside of you, and to share your story. So thank you.
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, that was very powerful. And obviously the concept and the fighting against human trafficking is a big cause near and dear to myself, as I'm the executive director of an organization to build healing centers. I just tend to think of how scary it must be in that situation, and just the messages that Janelle shared of understanding that we have to speak up. When we speak up, we are not being rude. We have to take control of what is important to us, because people, whether they know it or they're not, sometimes it's not even intentional. They shouldn't be speaking for us. Some of the things that she talked about is this idea of stop discounting yourself. Know your worth, know your value. Don't speak up just to hear yourself speak. But when you're coming from a place of value, when you have something to share because you truly believe it's going to help another individual, you have an obligation to do that. And I loved when she shared that when she started to speak up, all of the other speakers started too. And it reminds me of Marianne Williamson's poem, Our Deepest Fear, where she calls out right at the end that when we lean into our light liberates others. So you speaking up can actually be the gift that someone else needs. She talked about when things come up, before you speak, maybe just running it even through checks and balances. Is this reality, or is this just part of a story I'm creating for myself? And I really can't overemphasize when she talked about having a safe space. It's so important, whether you are looking to brainstorm going for a new job, leaving a relationship, changing the direction of your life, getting out of a bad situation, healing from trauma. You need to be in a safe space. And that doesn't always mean your best friend or your family. Sometimes that isn't the safe space that you need. So build trust, find your space. And when you find your space, lean into it, be open, and allow yourself to heal, because you cannot go forward when you're holding on to that pain. You can move forward, but it's not going to be at the level of being your true, authentic, and greatest self. So thank you so much. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow the show. And also, please share it. There are people out there who are struggling and who need to hear these messages so that they can live at their highest level. Remember, we grow stronger when we come together. I'm Clara Capano. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Women Winning Their Way.